So welcome to the series Behind the Screens. This is a series from the PS Center on how to conduct MHPSS trainings online. We have invited a group of people who have already been in trainings or conducted trainings and conduct trainings. And I just want to go over the episodes. The first one is Practice What You Preach. That's another episode. Today we're going to talk about planning. So today is a bit more technical. We will look into all the technical aspects of planning. Third episode will be on persisting past problems, meaning that we will look at longer, up to 10-day trainings, especially on those on PM Plus, Problem Management Plus. So I am Mia Susanna Kasha. I'm a technical advisor from the Reference Center for Psychosocial Support. And today my co-facilitator is Shona, who is a design and technology facilitator. And we have invited a couple of guests. Mel Powell is also here from PS Center and from the Icelandic Red Cross. We have Anouk Bosma, who is also from the PS Center. And then we have Petra, who is a co-facilitator with me in a training. That was great fun. And then we have Brad from the Philippines, who is the focal person. We'll talk more. And Verle from Netherlands Red Cross. I should mention that everything today, everybody has agreed to be recorded, and for reasons of confidentiality, remind you only to share what you feel comfortable about sharing, because it will be shared with a broader audience. I'm just going to take you through what it is that we're going to cover today. So as you can see, we're going to talk about the main differences between face-to-face training and online trainings. We're going into the planning and design of exercises, of using breakout rooms, etc. And then we talk about the stages in the planning. And furthermore, we have some submodels where we're going to take you through how to work and create scenarios so that we can have the scenario-based training in MHPSS that we need to have also in an online format. The exercises that we're talking about today will mostly be exercises and trainings where we do have digital tools. People can be online, people can see each other. And we will also later on talk about how we do when we and discuss it a bit if you have a more low-tech approach because of maybe not having the bandwidth to do a training. We're going to move on, and but the first thing that we're going to cover is the differences between being face-to-face and being online. And Shona will show us the mural board that we can start working with. And Shona, would you take over?
So what we're going to do is, instead of writing it ourselves, we're just going to discuss this, and you can unmute yourself or raise your hand, use the raise your hand function in Zoom. And I'm going to type it in for you so that we have like an overview of what do you think are the differences. So to start us off, I would like to invite our guests, which is Mel and Petra. Could you start us off with what were the major differences that came up for you in terms of in-person and online trainings?
Okay. I think the major difference for me is that it just required a complete mental shift. So normally I'm just on autopilot in terms of the pedagogy and developing the exercises, and I had to step back and do a mental shift about how I prepare the practical exercises in particular, and how I ensure that the interaction and the fun and the learning is there. I think also the amount of time that it takes to prepare an online training, it's a lot longer for me for quite a lot of reasons that I might go into later. So that's definitely something that's a major difference for me.
Petra, would you share your experience, please?
Yeah, I'd like to. I do agree a lot with everything Mel is saying. And I think for me, it took a long time to actually adjust myself to not believing I can do exactly the same teaching online as I can do in person. and this the contact to everybody involved in a course, in a training, is totally different. But yes, I actually think that now I've done different trainings, and of course we've been online, all of us, lately, the last year, for many hours. I think there's actually a lot of huge possibilities that and it's great, yeah. But I had to use some time to actually get into it. So the technical things, the programs, how to you get into the meetings, and so on. So I agree what Mel is saying is a lot, yeah.
Anouk, could you add a little bit to this?
Yes, for sure. I think there's several things for me that stand out, and I think it's the attention to detail that you really need with a digital environment, more so than in an in-person. Not that you don't need to be detailed oriented then, but even more so in preparation and during your training. Secondly, I think getting to know your group. So in terms of, as a trainer, who will be in the group, it's easier to get a sense of that in person than in an online environment. So preparatory meetings I found quite crucial in that sense as well, not to just start meeting each other when you have the training. And second to that, also creating a sense of community, because that is much easier to do when you have like a fun dinner planned, or you have tea breaks where you have small talk. And we talked a bit about that yesterday, and the need for buddy talks, etc. So also people amongst each other get to know each other. And then lastly, I would say I have a few more things, but I'll keep it short. Especially having a focus on the African region, and now having done some digital sessions there as well, not trainings yet, I will have one soon. Lack of digital access and skills have become much more crucial right now than they were before in accessing MHPSS trainings.
Thank you, Mel, Petra, and Anouk, for sharing your thoughts. And I'd like to invite all the participants as well to share your thoughts. Viviana, you did mention you facilitated a number of trainings. Can you just tell us about what you think are the major differences?
So, like Anouk, there were more sessions rather than training. I'm now going into a complete 3 days digital training next week, not on mental health PSS, but on epidemic response. But I think so thinking about the experience, I guess everything that has been said about involving participants and preparatory work, with online training, it becomes even more difficult with facilitators, because obviously, in my experience, there's not even the colleagues with whom you would just sit in a room and just go through are obviously somewhere else. So there's such again, speaking to that amount of detail that Anouk mentioned, really, and guidance to the nth degree about, facilitators' notes and who is doing what, and how it becomes so minutious, really, and tiring. and then it's connected also with them managing a sense of community, again, not only with the participant, but with the facilitators, and managing conflict when there are like kind of, I don't want to sound extreme, but definitely if there are like different opinions on how you approach something. So I think for me, it's to begin with as being that monumental work that goes with the facilitator, really, in putting together the training, and with the facilitators themselves. And then the same consideration that have already been made going to for the participants. It has already been mentioned, so the technical and the digital access and technology. As Anouk, I work mainly with the Africa region, with the Caribbean, and even just having, people being able to keep the camera on, for example, because of the bandwidth, becomes an issue. And so it's really difficult to just, even if you cannot even make eye contact, to have that sense of community, really. And then it goes into the background, and obviously working a lot with volunteers. They don't kind of much private space maybe when you do that, if they're at home, etc. So there's all sorts of noises and stuff. And then I had something around, no, I think it's been mentioned. So yes, so fourth, so the We talked a lot about sense of community, but the technical bits. So if you go into, so for mental health PSS, of course, maybe even if you go into sort of really technical details, but even more when I work with, as I said, epidemic prevention, all that. So right now, where the training next week will be on COVID-19 and cholera preparedness. So we have to actually teach remotely to produce chlorine, you know, with all, and people need to do to actually, so on their side, they will have all the equipment, and then they'll go and do the practicalities, but you have to like oversee all that. It's really tiring. And also, you know, again, going back to that point about facilitators, all this kind of like quality control, really, I think we could have a point about that. Like, how do you ensure really that it's being doing, you know, you got fuzzy video, you can't see very well, it interrupts.
Yeah.
So we have a number of strategies, and maybe we're going to discuss it later on. But
Definitely. Thank you so much, Viviana. Adam and Karen, do you want to jump in and share some of your thoughts?
Hi. Sometimes you have a limitation because people turn off the cam, you know, and nobody know what they do. Sometimes they disappear, and that's it. And you say, for example, like now, no, I say, Shona, what do you think about something? You know, I'm in silence. We don't know where is the people. Then it's not possible sometimes to manage this kind of the number of participation too, because sometimes it's so much and it's not possible to do the training with everybody, or to know if they are learning or not, or what. The time of concentration too, because sometimes we make some training for hours, but they say it's not possible for the people also ask that they can be concentrated like a 30 minutes. That's it. Then we reduce our training to 2 hours only, and to make more activities for to be in different kind of parts, and to return to the concentration to this kind of.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
People,
sorry, you had another point. Please add it.
The last one is that sometimes the people talk so much. One person take like a 5 or 10 minutes to say something, and others they take like a 30 seconds. Then how to manage this kind of, you know,
True. Thank you so much, Karen. Adam, did you want to add something?
Sure, just a couple of quick things, both on the strengths and challenges. I also agree with others that I think you can be really inclusive, or at least more inclusive, because you don't have to spend as much money paying for people to come to hotels and restaurants and all those things. So that's been really terrific. I would just say that I've learned you have to be very flexible, because as much planning as go in, there could be pets and kids or power outages, or you just don't know, and that all can figure into the training. So flexibility just becomes really important. Clear rules and expectations, and just I think sometimes that has to just become very, very like early on, the expectations being very clear to everyone about how much time it will take. And then my last point, I think, is just, unlike in-person trainings, asking people to do a lot of as much work as possible ahead of time, like with reading things, learning about the training. So when they get to the training, it's not the beginning, but you've already started to kind of prepare yourself, which I think is a little bit different than the in-person experiences that I've had. Thank you.
That is perfect. Thank you so much, Adam, for sharing those. And I'm going to turn it over to Ia, actually, to talk more about the next part of it.
So what you've listed is actually what we're going to talk about. How online training changes our relation to space, time, you've mentioned that, the boundaries, and the interaction, but also talk a bit about accessibility. So if you think about space, the relation to space, first of all, I'm with you now, and I'm in a professional space. I'm in the office, but some of you are from home. So very often when we train online, I've also done that from home. It's like we're on a mutual house call. You know, you go to people's private homes. So that's a totally different space, and it's so different from when you dress. You know, you stand up in the morning and you dress, and then you change scenery. You go to the venue. But here we sit at home, and you may not even, you know, sometimes people are not only wearing they're still wearing pajama pants. So it's not, and then when you come back home, you don't change into your leisure clothes. So it's a complete change, and that entails, that's a lot of things that we need to think about. So when we're doing MHPSS training and people talk about personal things, they need to talk about how they feel. They need to talk about their sensorial experience of being with somebody in distress. Like, I couldn't talk to that person because I got so overwhelmed when somebody talked about having been witnessing death, merge, or whatever. When we as facilitators need to be professional, we need to be sure that ours is a safe space, but also that people are in a safe space, meaning that you don't have, I've been in trainings where people, all of a sudden you see somebody walking by, or there's children, or there's dogs. So ensuring that this is a safe space for everybody, and confidentiality can be maintained when we do, for instance, the body talks and talk about very private things. And these were some of the challenges that some of you mentioned. So this goes into, as Adam is saying, clearing the expectations. My final point here is, actually, I will start with that we need to be respectful of participants' time by keeping time. If we say it begins at 2, we begin at 2. And if we say we end at 3:30, we end at 3:30. It's disrespectful not to. But in general, we know that people sign up, they don't show up. So we have taken a total different attitude towards time. That's one thing. Then there's other things that take longer in an online training. We want to hear everybody, and that takes longer. Sometimes what I also think we need to factor in is that in MHPSS trainings, people will talk about their personal experiences during Corona. So we need to have time set aside for that, because it's in an MHPSS training, and then they will reveal how isolated, sad, losses they have suffered. We have experienced that in our trainings. So there needs to be some space where you have some flexibility. But whenever I make a training program, it always says the program is indicative, expect changes, because you go with the flow. But you can't do that as much in online training, because you need to respect much more the pauses and the breaks. And also you may have guest speakers coming in. So apart from the meticulous planning, you also need to be much more oriented towards time and keeping time, even though people may not have that same understanding of time. So that changes it, and it's also a matter of culture here. And Mel, I hope you will talk more about that, because when I've been training in some context where people come about an hour after they were supposed to be there, and I sit and wait, and I can live with that. But in online training, I can't. I need to start, and I need to stop on time. So that has changed. The next thing that also changes is the boundaries, because of all the other changes that happen. In a training, you need to be mentally and physically present. In an online training, you don't. You can just be physically present, or your online person, your avatar, can be there. I've been in trainings where people are not there because they just signed out, and you just see the names, but they're actually not there. So this happens a lot. So the boundaries change, and also we know that our attention span is changing, and most of us will check emails if it's just a piece, slightly boring. We will check emails. We will check our mobiles. We will order things on, and oh yeah, there's some if blah 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 blah. So that has changed tremendously, and that puts a lot of more. My word is demands on us as facilitators to keep people engaged. And as Karina is saying, they can only be for 2 hours. So if it is for 2 hours, it is for 2 hours. The pre-training meeting helps clear a lot of these expectations, the pre-training and the information that we send out. We're going to maybe cover that a bit more. Interaction has changed, of course, because we don't have the same sensorial feel. However, we can do a lot to get the oxytocin flowing by looking at each other, by smiling. I'm looking at Petra. I've been training with her. I've been in the same room and we had so much fun and dance. And so that brings the smile and the oxytocin. We can do a lot of that in the online if people can be on camera. We can do exercises where we imagine things because we know that it will give us the same effects. So that is one thing we can do. Imagine sniffing the earth right after rain. You know how the earth smells where you live right after the rains. So we can all have a smell of that. Yeah, we can do a lot of things to enhance the connection, body pairs, etc. But finally, of course, we have the accessibility. And what we have found in the trainings that we have developed mostly is that we need to have internet, we need to have people being able to use the basic technologies, but we can't expect that they know them. So we cover them in the pre-training meeting. And we also, when we design the training, the first exercise we do is also to get once more reacquainted with the tool. And there's also always tutorials that people can do before the training. Yeah, so one thing that I like about the way we use, for instance, the mural board when it comes to accessibility is that we can all see the same thing. We all have access to the same thing. So in the end, it can be another program. Mural is just one example of a program. So if we all have access to it, in the end, when we see the board that we have worked on during a few days of training, it's like being in the training hall where you have all the walls populated. You know how they look, and you can have these post-its and you can have this exchange. So I think that for accessibility, if we can do that, if we run the longer trainings, that is really, that's optimal. However, I've also run shorter trainings where it's only been me with my, as you know, some of you know that I will never ever in my life show a PowerPoint. It will be my PowerPoints and I will use a flip chart with drawings and instructions. So we can still, up to 90 participants I've had in several trainings, so we can still have this kind of engagement going, provided they can see me and I can see some of them, so that we have some sort of exchange and sense of where we're going. So these are the key points. And as we have been talking, Shona, you have been populating the mural board, I think. So you put some notes in there. I have written more on this in the paper that we can share. And here are some of the key things. Yeah.
So essentially what I did is take all the points that you had shared and kind of started to categorize it in this way. And by categorizing it in this way, what happens is you start thinking of it, these relations in a way that you can create spaces or experiences around when you're trying to engage your participants. So one of the things that we can look at is relationship to space. So I'm just going to give you a small example about that. And here you can see it's like a passenger lounge, or this was an exercise that we did during the training, and we tried to recreate it with illustrations. And if you zoom into that, you'll see that there is a numbering and there is physical symptoms that you can see in a person. So it is so as designed that when you're doing this exercise, if you zoom in, you're seeing the physical symptoms, and then you go talk to that person to see what their emotional symptoms are. And this was more in terms of a role play. And then another thing that we could do is using floor plans. And this is something that we created in order to understand how, when we do small group discussions in terms of Zoom breakout rooms, if you orient them in a way that there is a floor plan, people can actually visualize and imagine what kind of room they are in, where they are located. Maybe I have to go and talk to this person in the canteen. So it gives them a little sense of space that also kind of shapes the way you have that conversation with people in terms of role plays. So I'm going to stop here. I know Anouk had something to say. Anouk.
Yeah, but the accessibility, I forgot I just mentioned, sorry, I just realized we forgot 2 important points. Accessibility in terms of language. A lot of the trainings are in English, and the world doesn't exist with only English-speaking countries. So have multiple trainings available in multiple languages, I think is very essential, but also accessibility for people with a disability. Which makes it very hard for some to attend online trainings, more so than in person is already a challenge. But also at the same time, it could create access because you don't need to physically go somewhere. So it could go both ways.
Absolutely. Great. So I should just say what we do is we use a lot of the breakout rooms to create that kind of connectivity between people. And I'd like to move on and say, ask some of you who prepared trainings already, what goes into the planning? How does all this fit into the planning that you have done?
If I could just say really quickly, why I'm here is so little. I've never really thought about space in this way with regard to training. So just grateful to be here because it's an interesting layer of thinking that I haven't really considered that much yet.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think for me, it's been just like trial what me and other colleagues think could be helpful. So it's really good to think about it in this way. Something that we're trying to do is to, if for example, in those trainings where they have practical exercises that need to be translated, to try and use the camera as much as possible. So now, if the restriction allows for some people to come together, so have that group, and then we have a facilitator, we see them as a group, and then prior to the training, we have one person that maybe is a bit more, has more experience or is more skilled with the topic, who functions as group coordinator, so could replicate the scenario there and make preparations there. Like, so for example, if you were, I don't know, working in a scenario that was in a refugee camp, so that person could set up the prop that side instead. So if people can congregate to a common location, that's much easier, and that's the situation that we have at the moment in some places. Yeah. So that was an example, but reiterating, this is really helpful because it's just like it's trying to think about strategies. There's not at least I haven't seen a manual or that's what you do, go ahead.
Right. So yeah, Petra and Mel.
Yeah,
Petra first.
Yeah, I totally agree. And regarding your question, I was so surprised how much extra time I need to put into planning sessions online. I've been teaching and training for many, many years. Very practical stuff, first aid, psychological first aid, psychosocial support, like the translation process, translating the exercises to online, meaningful online exercises. And I just got to think about, the space, the first point you mentioned. I've never thought about the use of my space, the little space of the screen. I am very aware how I use body language, everything when I teach in person, but the use of the screen and all the possibilities and opportunities that are connected to that, but that's been a huge, major thing to consider in the planning process.
Yeah, Mel, would you also?
Yeah, I think if I could just build on those answers as well, like I always go through a pretty detailed step-by-step planning process in terms of like the pedagogy of how to develop a training. But I think an additional step that I've had to put in, which has been the very first step for me, is to think about, one, my own preferred ways of training online and learning a lot about myself as an online trainer, which is quite different from myself as a face-to-face trainer and what works for me in terms of keeping up the energy and making sure that I'm, being a good trainer. But even more than that, like thinking about my participants. So primarily my training participants are from a different culture from me. And I've been training face-to-face with people from different cultures for a long time, but this is the first time for me to do predominantly online face-to-face. So I had to go back to square one and like redo all the assumptions. So I can think about what works for me online from my culture, but it may not work for my participants. So when I was thinking about the design phase, I had to go and speak to, you know, a representative sample of the culture I was working with and say, what works for you? Like, what time of day is going to be best for online? You know, I know you've got kids at home due to COVID and this and that, and maybe you're more attentive at particular times. And actually, there was a pattern to that. And what duration is going to work for you? And I was quite surprised because it's quite different from what would work for me. So I really had to step it back and learn about like what works online from a cultural perspective for other people. And obviously this is quite hard in a mixed culture group, but I'm mostly training one culture in a lot of my trainings. So yes, I really had to step things back and put a whole new process like right at the start. You know, I already had my materials and they work face to face, but they may not work online, and I just learned so much. It's a really helpful process for me.
Yeah. So Anouk, I can see you have your hand up, but actually we will continue to the next because we want to move on and give you some more on the planning process. And Shona, would you take the next slides?
Definitely.
Murals.
So Mel shared with us this really beautiful video that I'm going to share and play a bit of it as we move on to the next part, which is more thinking of how to design activities for the training. So yeah.
Understanding how best to help people in distress can seem scary or hard, but it doesn't have to be. By using the principles of psychological first aid, we can help people who are in distress to feel calm and able to cope in difficult situations. We'll explain the 3 action principles of psychological first aid, provide how-to guidance, and give you tips from the experts. Psychological first aid is a model and approach that was developed by the World Health Organization and is used by many humanitarian actors and everyday people throughout the world. Psychological first aid can help in both emergency and non-emergency situations.
So we're going to stop here, and I would just ask Mel to tell us a little bit about the process of translation. So when you were thinking about, you know, your in-person trainings being translated to an online model, what is the process that you adopted? And I know you use Canva here so beautifully. That is another tool, but in general, talk about what went through your mind.
Yeah, so I think this goes back to the cultural consultations that I did. People said, you know, we can't do reading. We've got kids at home that we need to manage. We're just super stressed in the COVID environment. Please don't give us reading. Don't give us big things to look at. We just need something quick to get us all on the same page. And so I said, okay, what about like a short video? And that video that I've made using a pretty simple, and also it can be a free program called Powtoon, and there's lots of different ones, seemed to match that. So I did a little draft one, and I was like, what about this? Would you be able to watch something like this? Would that increase your learning? And they were really receptive to that. And then we back and forwarded a few versions of this, like this, or like this, like this, like this. And this is the model that matched. And that snippet you saw was in English, but actually it's in translated over into Icelandic as well, with a full voiceover and text, so it's more accessible. So I normally I would give like a big reading, and I'd be like, I want you to read the PS Center manual on psychological first aid, for example. But I condensed that manual into this 4-minute fun animated video because I just thought people are stressed. This is the feedback I'm getting. This is going to really increase the learning. And I can't say you can condense everything from the manual into 4 minutes, but it was the key things I wanted people to know so we could all be on the same page and launch into the training. And also because it was so short, if people didn't have the time to have watched it, then I was like, I'm just going to pop this video on now. And if you've already seen it, go get yourself a coffee. So it was very, you know, non-shaming, and everyone had the place and space to be on the same page.
Perfect. Thank you, Mel. And actually, talking about using technology, I think we were just trying to think about how to position our activities. So your y-axis is like the technology aspect. So it is low tech down below and high tech on the top. And then you're thinking about whether it can be facilitator centered or whether it is participant centered. What I would say when I look at Mel's video is it is a high tech facilitator centered. Essentially, a lot of it is like the facilitator sharing all the material or all the resources that she has. And when you go to more participant centered formats, you maybe involve them in a group discussion like we did in the beginning in terms of asking the participants to share their opinions and start using technology as well. And Ia will give us a little more examples about the low tech
Yeah.
part.
And I think also you could ask them to do a TikTok. Do a TikTok of high tech, you know, of PFA. What are the three principles? So they could each bring their example to the class. So for the low tech facilitator centered, I thought of the PS Center that has developed, or somebody developed with us, an online training that can be done in many different ways. Yeah, there's a video people can download. There's an exercise sheet so that they can actually watch the video, pause it where the instructor says pause it, and then they can do the exercises. So it is not very high tech, and it's they're being taught. Or you can do it differently, because the same material is also designed so that a trainer can do it, so that you can do it in your own language, you can translate it, you can speak it over phone, and then you can ask people to do the exercises. So we had these, when we designed it, we had both options in mind. So it needed to be versatile, so it could be used in all these different ways to cover different situations in the world. So our idea, Shona's idea in presenting this, is also to think about, when you plan your training, where do you want to be with the different activities, what is suitable for the audience and for the technological possibilities that's available where you are. And we're going further. Do you want to say more?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one single point, which is in terms of the time frame as well. So if you're doing a one-day training, definitely place it somewhere which is more low tech, because what happens is you do not want to take the entire of your time teaching people technology and how to use it. So you do want to parse it out in terms of how many number of days that I have, am I going to do this training, and what kind of training we're going to do, because we also have to add the technical knowledge. A lot of them have to acquire that, and you need to be able to practice that. So you might want to even add in that piece. Anoop, you have something to share?
Very quick comment. I just wanted to applaud you for the tutorial you did for us, that mural tutorial that you sent ahead of the training. And I think it really levels people at the same digital level. So I think it's super important not to only think about MHPSS skills all needing to be equalized, but digital skills needing to be equalized as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Anoop. And just to start plugging that in, maybe we can think about what is the timeline that we're looking at in terms of even designing these trainings and planning these trainings. So this is just a small, like when you're thinking about a 2 to 5 day training, what are the different stages involved? And you have the mural copy if you want to look at it, or you can just look at my screen. And I'll just walk you through the different stages that we have been at, and then maybe we all can together discuss what was the most surprising element that is there, and things that we should really take into and adapt into our practice of facilitation. So the first few days, the first thing is just having a main goal in mind in terms of training and organizing and planning around it. Usually if you have clients that you're working with or volunteers that you're working with, coordinating with the national societies to just get an idea of the schedule and what are the resources that are there. The second part of it is more about the information sharing and technology infrastructure. So if you're planning this training with an existing group which already has a certain set of technologies, you might want to adopt that in, because it is easier for you to learn 2 or 3 technologies as opposed to teaching 10 people new things, say completely different mechanisms of file sharing. And in this same place, you also, like when you're talking to your collaborators and guests, you set up your set of rules as to how you're going to coordinate, how you're going to organize your files, and a lot of these different things. Because when you were in person, you could discuss and maybe make changes on paper, but when you're online, trust me, your files will get deleted. And you do not want that, because finally it's like everyone's written so much and everything, you don't have any of the files that you need. Then setting up times and schedules well ahead to really plan out the next stages. So, and during the stage 2 and 3, that transition phase, if you're using any new technologies, it is really advised that you take the time to test out those technologies to make sure everyone on the facilitation side has a good idea of what these technologies and are able to instruct people and participants during the training to use them. So the next stage of it is like assessing the participants. So we did it through surveys. We actually sent a participant assessment trying to understand. We got their bandwidth, how much is your internet bandwidth, what is your technological capabilities, trying to understand their language skills, just to see if the participants during their registration process were a good fit for the training. And this is a very important step, specifically in online trainings, because depending on the cohort that you have, you might have to design your training very differently and the use of technologies. So here also there was one more part, which is brainstorming the challenges that might come up at every stages. So what has helped us, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday, we brainstorm all the challenges and kind of use different scale, which is the Hopfalls principles, to look at what are the sectors of those challenges and how can we address that. Then in the 4th stage, you kind of analyze this data and start adapting and designing your curriculum according to that, and designing the activities as well. And also defining the roles and responsibilities. A lot of the times you might need one of your facilitator to take more of a project management role so that you manage the entire project. So just having all those elements into place. And one thing that I would definitely advise at this point of time when you're creating the training is to have a modular content creation approach. So it's like you take this module and you can plug it in on the next day directly. If you can use a project management software for this, or a different method to doing this. But the idea being, it shouldn't be pages and pages on a document, so that you're not going to plug it in. So it could even be like an Excel sheet. You just have the description and you know how to change the schedules of the training itself. And then stage 5, we're dealing more with the material design in terms of resources and tools, and a lot about the cultural adaptation, which is if you need to change your language, illustrations, or the navigation of the design, you could do that. And we talk about the pre-training content here. And then till stage 7, you do like a test run of the entire thing. You might want to test run a few activities. Specifically for us, we did most of the complex activities that required a lot of breakout rooms and things like that. We tested it out beforehand to make sure that they work before taking it to the participants. Even though you might have glitches on that day, but having that test will help you kind of narrow that down and map your activities. And then finally, the pre-training meeting. So this one was a very important part of it, and we already started to share a little bit. Petra and Anoop, could you jump in and talk a little bit about what we did in the pre-training meetings and why was it so important?
I was gonna add, you also start building the community from that particular moment. So I really like that document that you shared in advance, Shona, where people could already give a photo, some little details about themselves, and we could read about each other in advance. And it was a really nice way to connect from the get-go, basically. And yeah, everything that you have here on the mural, obviously, and the resources, checking the technology, and that the tutorial that I just mentioned, we played around on mural together, tried to test it for everybody if it works, because otherwise you spend all of the first day testing your technologies.
Yeah, and definitely just to add to that, it's like having this just maybe 7 or 10 days before the training really helps, because it gives people a little bit of timeline to be able to take in all those instructions and play around with it. Give them very small tasks. They should never be like, you know, you have to write a huge page on something, but rather like just upload a photo or things like that. Like include the technical training into the activities for creating the community. If by doing that, you're kind of hitting 2 birds with the same stone. And then during the training, we also try to incorporate a lot of community engagement and responsibilities, which allowed for the participants to take up different roles throughout the days. And we were quite flexible. We had a wonder wall and people shared in their comments, and we changed the schedules a lot based on that. And being able to be flexible throughout the training was very important, because it was a 7-hour-long training. So we're talking specifically about the PSS in emergencies context. And then after the training, we built community by keeping them engaged, and Pred and everyone else were on this WhatsApp group where we shared our work. And Viviana would like to add something there.
Yeah, I want to ask a question, because for me, one thing that has been very helpful during our training and during the training, the session that I deliver, is that I've always had a person who was doing like a Shona, that was doing the technical bits. Now, when we, you know, in the Caribbean, we work with a group of trainers that we trained 2 years ago, but they're volunteers. So most, and then their branches are so small, they're like 10 people. Tops, and some of them don't even have a budget for like training cascading. So it's actually work that these volunteers do. So it's a question like when we are supporting trainers that won't have that option to have their own techie person, what can we suggest in terms of, obviously I go back to that diagram of like low tech solution, etc. But at the same time, they are eager to keep it engaging and using some sort of technology. So we don't have to do it now, but it would be really helpful if we could have like maybe some pointers about how we could deal with those situations later on.
But I would say we've actually come to the point where we have to end with a group discussion. So it's a brilliant question to ask, and I saw that Mel had an answer. So, or maybe have something to offer on that. Mel?
Yeah, I think that's a huge challenge, and you know, the Icelandic Red Cross is not well resourced either, so I'm never going to get a tech person to assist me with any trainings. So what I've done is to go more for the low tech, and I know Shona said that video was high tech, but actually it was low tech because I did it in advance and it was a really simple program. But in terms of low tech, there's lots of things you can do to keep it engaging, like for example, put in a ball throw to do activities. Really low tech, anyone can do that. Or, you know, just like Ia likes to do, you know, you hold up your signs for different things. And I think keeping it low tech can still be super engaging. I'm not very good with the boards moving around on the screen. You know, I'm almost getting a headache watching Mural. So I really do prefer the low tech as a participant, although I do like doing all the post-it notes as well. So I think participants can get just as much out of low tech as long as you're thinking of ways to make it more engaging.
Definitely. Thank you, Mel. And that is an interesting point about the boats moving around. So navigation does become a little bit difficult when everyone's not on the same platform, and you need to be mindful that we need to kind of put in more time there, because we imagine it's going to be, oh, we put a chart paper, we put a post-it, it's going to take very less amount of time. But no, it actually takes, you need to give them time to even, for their eyes to even be able to understand what is the pattern of navigation. And there is a lot of instruction that goes on, I think, the day one and during the videos, to be able to build that capacity to be engaging with these different tools. Like last question to think about, what are the major considerations that really came up for you in terms of doing online trainings? And yeah, people can just share their opinions about that.
Yeah, can I add one point? It's related to the comment I just put in the chat. I really learned from attending trainings from around the world, because I figured, oh, I didn't even think I could do that. Like playing a song in pauses or asking people to read poems. Like there's so many culturally appropriate low-tech solutions if you just put off your I'm the organizer, I'm the facilitator hat and ask people for input from their local cultural context, as you would when you would arrive in country, making sure it's a nice cross-cultural representation if it's an international training as well.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, Anouk, that when I have not online trainings, I always ask people to what is their special talent, a hidden talent, and I put it on the wall. So whenever, oh, somebody knows how to sing, let's do a song. So I think that you can do the same kind of things. And in addition to Viviana, I wanted to say something that we covered it yesterday. But what I like to do, because also to avoid staring at each other that we also talked about yesterday, I would do a model and ask people to copy it so they would take notes, which has many, many purposes. You learn, you use your motor skills, you don't look at each other. Now we've been doing it for an hour, that's okay. But if you do it for longer, so I think you need to switch all these things so that the learning is really adapted. And not only, I mean, also we can also learn that way in writing a model and taking notes. So you can use pretty basic tools, I think. So sorry for butting in. I was just dying to say that.
And one more practical consideration. I just learned myself that for me, it's 1 day is 1 day preparation. So it's almost one-on-one in terms of time to prepare, if not more, but at minimum, take a day for a day, an hour for an hour, etc.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I would highly recommend, if you have like a 1 day training, have 7 days for that. And because you realize you have to send it to multiple people to get the checks done, and you might not realize that, but everything is so detail oriented. There'll be spelling mistakes all over the board. You want to make sure that those are not there. So just for tying and wrapping everything, so if you're conducting a 1 day training, that's 7 days, and for more, say if you're doing a 2 to 5, you might want to have at least 3 to 4 weeks for that. So just in terms of preparation, think of weeks. It's never less than a week.
Yeah.
2 final comments, and then we're closing the session.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that probably my biggest lesson that I've learned after doing, online training for this last year is that I had to let go of so many assumptions. Like I had quite a lot of conflicting assumptions even about what it was like to do online training. And, just personally, my assumptions were, oh, online training is draining for me. It's not fun. The participants won't learn as much. And once I was able to let go of those assumptions, actually after doing a few trainings, I felt like I was able to be more effective and my participants were able to be more involved. And it's come up a lot here that online training does take a lot more time, but I had this assumption, oh, it'll be so fast, it'll be so easy, everything's digital. So I had to let go of that assumption and be a bit kinder to myself and, let my managers know, like, this is going to take me a really long time. I can't just whip up a training for you to deliver on Friday. So yeah, letting go of those assumptions, like I mentioned in my opening point, like just a complete mental shift helped me be more effective as a trainer, helped me really get into the spirit of online training and to bring my participants with me on this journey that we all have to go on, unfortunately, during COVID.
Thank you, Mel. These were really brilliant work to sum up what we've been discussing today, and actually as to put a final full stop to what we've been doing. So from Shona and myself, thank you so much for joining us and for being able to be here today. It's been really engaging and interesting.